Leave him there." The words came through the radio with a coldness that made every firefighter nearby stop moving for a second. Inside the smoke-covered Sterling estate in Beverly Hills, California, Captain Marcus Carter stood alone behind the last line of emergency response, listening as the command he trusted most decided his fate without hesitation. The massive mansion had become a maze of darkness, alarms, and confusion. A family was still waiting to be rescued, and Marcus had already stepped forward when everyone else was told to pull back. "Chief, Carter is still inside," one firefighter said through the radio, his voice filled with disbelief. On the other end was Chief Richard Holloway, the man who had commanded the department for years. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence. Then came the answer. "We've done enough. Leave him there." Outside the mansion, the flashing red lights reflected against the wet pavement of the driveway. The entire crew looked at one another, unable to understand what they had just heard. Marcus Carter was not just another firefighter. He was the man everyone called when a situation required patience, courage, and a steady hand. For 16 years, he had walked into places others feared. Not because he wanted attention, but because someone always needed help. Yet in that moment, the world saw him as someone who could be forgotten. Marcus adjusted the strap of his helmet and looked through the fading glow around him. He did not know what was being said outside. He did not know that the people who should have supported him had already decided he was gone. All he knew was that there were still people who needed him. "I'm coming back," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Earlier that evening, Marcus had been finishing his shift at Los Angeles Fire Department Station 27 when the emergency call arrived. The Sterling Estate fire had spread quickly, and the names attached to the address immediately caught attention. Nathan Sterling, the billionaire founder of Sterling Industries, was inside with his family. Cameras had followed Nathan Sterling for years. He was known across America as a technology pioneer, a businessman who built a fortune from innovation. But behind the headlines was a father worried about protecting the people he loved most. Marcus did not care about wealth or reputation. To him, every life carried the same value. That was something his father had taught him when he was young in South Los Angeles. "A person's worth is never measured by what they own," his father used to say. "It's measured by what they are willing to do for others." Those words stayed with Marcus every day. While others noticed his uniform, his position, or his background, Marcus only focused on the mission. He had spent years proving himself in a profession where respect was not always given equally. He carried every challenge quietly, never asking for special treatment, never speaking about the awards that filled a small box at home. Even the highest honor he had received from the President of the United States remained hidden away in his closet. To Marcus, a medal was just metal. The lives he saved were what mattered. But tonight was different. Tonight, someone had chosen to leave him behind. And as the sounds of the emergency response faded around the burning estate, Marcus stood in the silence and realized one painful truth. The person everyone had forgotten was the one who had never forgotten anyone else. Marcus Carter had always understood that the loudest moments in life were not always the ones people remembered. Sometimes, the moments that defined a person happened quietly, far away from cameras, applause, and recognition. Long before the Sterling estate became the center of attention, Marcus had already built a reputation among the people who truly knew him. At Los Angeles Fire Department Station 27, his name carried a meaning that went beyond his years of service. He was the firefighter who stayed after everyone else left, the one who checked on families after emergencies were over, the one who remembered the names of people he had helped, because to him, they were never just another call. Marcus grew up in South Los Angeles, California, in a small neighborhood where his parents taught him the importance of dignity and responsibility. His mother, Denise Carter, worked long hours as a nurse assistant, and his father, Elijah Carter, repaired old cars in a small garage near their home. They never had much money, but they always had enough kindness to share. When Marcus was 16 years old, his father gave him a simple piece of advice that stayed with him for decades. "The world will judge you before it knows you," Elijah told him. "Do not let their judgment decide the person you become." Marcus carried those words through every difficult day of his life. When he joined the fire department, he quickly learned that courage was not only about walking into dangerous situations, it was also about standing with people who felt unseen. He knew what it felt like to be underestimated. He knew what it felt like when some people looked at his uniform and saw only his skin color before they saw his dedication. But Marcus never allowed bitterness to control him. Instead, he answered doubt with action. His colleagues remembered the small things. The extra chair he brought for an elderly resident during a safety inspection. The groceries he quietly delivered to a family after their home was damaged. The way he stayed late at the station to help younger firefighters prepare for their exams. "You know you could be somewhere bigger than this," one younger firefighter named Daniel Brooks once told him. Marcus smiled while cleaning his equipment. "Helping people is not a small thing, Daniel." What most people did not know was that Marcus had a history of service far beyond his station. Years earlier, before anyone outside the department knew his name, he had been involved in an incident that changed the life of Nathan Sterling forever. But Marcus never talked about it. He never gave interviews. He never used the story to build his career. When reporters later asked him about his achievements, he always redirected the conversation toward his team. "Nobody saves anyone alone," he would say. That was who Marcus Carter was. A man who carried recognition but never carried pride. A man who held honors but never used them as a shield. Back at Sterling Estate, while the world outside believed the situation had ended, Marcus was still fighting to do what he had always done. Protect people. The same instinct that guided him for 16 years was still there. The same voice that told him every life mattered was louder than fear, louder than disappointment, louder than the silence coming through his radio. Outside, Nathan Sterling stood surrounded by emergency crews, unaware that the person who had changed his life years ago was the same person now being forgotten. He looked toward the estate, his expression filled with worry, not knowing that the quiet firefighter inside was not just another member of the crew. He was the reason Nathan Sterling had been given another chance at life years before. And soon, the truth that Marcus had kept hidden for so long would finally come into the light. The name Nathan Sterling had been printed on magazine covers, business reports, and television interviews across America for years. To millions of people, he was the billionaire who built Sterling Industries from a small technology company into a global empire. He was known for his sharp decisions, his calm confidence, and his ability to turn impossible ideas into successful businesses. But on that night in Beverly Hills, California, none of that mattered. Behind the gates of Sterling Estate, Nathan was no longer a billionaire. He was simply a father trying to protect his family. The mansion that represented success and achievement had become a place filled with uncertainty. Nathan stood outside with his wife, Claire, and their 12-year-old daughter, Emily, watching emergency crews move through the property. His expensive suit was covered with dust. His phone kept ringing with unanswered calls, and his attention never left the building where his daughter had been moments before. "Where is the firefighter who went back inside?" Nathan asked one of the responders. The firefighter looked away for a moment before answering. "Captain Marcus Carter." The name meant nothing to Nathan at first. It was just another name among the many people who had come to help. But something about the way the firefighter said it made Nathan pause. There was respect in his voice. He went in when everyone else was told to wait. The firefighter continued quietly. Nathan looked toward the building, unable to understand why someone would take that risk for people he had never met. He had spent his entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Business partners wanted deals. Investors wanted results. Strangers wanted access to his success. It had become difficult for Nathan to believe that people could act without expecting something in return. But Marcus Carter had done exactly that. He had walked into danger without knowing Nathan's name, his wealth, or his reputation. He had simply heard that someone needed help. Years earlier, Nathan had learned that life could change in a single moment. 12 years before the fire at Sterling Estate, he had been a much younger businessman struggling to expand his company. During a difficult period in his life, he experienced an unexpected situation that left him separated from his family and uncertain about his future. In that moment, a young firefighter named Marcus Carter had been one of the people who helped bring him home safely. Nathan remembered the calm voice, the steady presence, and the way Marcus refused any praise afterward. When Nathan tried to thank him publicly, Marcus simply said, "I was doing my job, sir." Then he disappeared back into his work. Nathan searched for him afterward, but the firefighter never looked for recognition. The moment became one of those memories that stayed hidden in the back of Nathan's mind. He remembered the kindness, but he never knew where Marcus went or what happened to him. Now, standing outside Sterling Estate, Nathan felt a strange connection he could not explain. He watched the firefighters around him. Some looked worried, some looked uncomfortable. Something was wrong. "Why does everyone keep saying his name like that?" Nathan asked Claire. She looked toward the group of firefighters and lowered her voice. "Because they know he is different." A few minutes later, Nathan saw an older firefighter remove his helmet and stare silently toward the building. "Captain Carter has saved more people than anyone here," the firefighter said. "He just never talks about it." Nathan looked back at the flames and the emergency lights reflecting across the driveway. He thought about the stranger who had once helped him when he had nothing to offer in return. He thought about the man who had just risked everything for his family. What Nathan did not know was that while the world saw Marcus Carter as just another firefighter, there was a story behind that uniform that almost no one knew. A story of sacrifice, recognition, and a hidden honor that had never changed the way Marcus treated people. And soon, Nathan Sterling would discover that the person he owed the most was the person everyone else had chosen to overlook. The night over Beverly Hills felt unusually quiet after the first wave of emergency activity began to slow. The flashing lights still painted the streets in red and white, but the voices around Sterling Estate had changed. At first, everyone had been focused on survival. Now, they were beginning to realize something was missing. Captain Marcus Carter had not come back. Outside the property, firefighters stood near their vehicles, exchanging worried looks. Some checked their equipment. Others looked toward the damaged mansion in silence. They all knew Marcus. They knew the way he worked, the way he treated people, and the way he never walked away from someone who needed help. Daniel Brooks, the younger firefighter who had worked alongside Marcus for 3 years, kept looking toward the entrance. "Something does not feel right," he said quietly. Another firefighter beside him nodded. Carter would not just disappear. Their words were interrupted when Chief Richard Holloway walked toward them. His expression was controlled, almost too controlled. "Everyone back to your stations," he ordered. "The situation is under control." Daniel looked at him carefully. "Chief, Captain Carter was still inside." Richard did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the group with a firm expression. "We made the necessary decisions." The sentence felt heavier than it should have. Daniel lowered his voice. "Necessary for who?" The question hung in the air. No one responded. Across the driveway, Nathan Sterling noticed the tension. He had spent years negotiating billion-dollar deals, reading body language in conference rooms, and recognizing when someone was hiding something. He saw it now. The firefighters were not acting like a team that had lost a colleague during a difficult operation. They looked like people who were carrying a question they were afraid to ask. Nathan walked closer. "Excuse me," he said. "I need to understand what happened to Captain Carter." Richard turned toward him. "Mr. Sterling, your family is safe. That is what matters." Nathan remained still. "I appreciate everything your team has done, but I asked about Captain Carter." The chief's expression tightened slightly. "These situations are complicated. We cannot focus on every individual decision made during an emergency." Nathan looked at him for a moment. There was something about those words that bothered him. A person had risked everything to save his family, and now that same person was being reduced to a decision on a report. "He saved my daughter," Nathan said. "He deserves more than a sentence." Richard looked away. Captain Carter understood the risks. Nathan noticed the way the chief avoided using Marcus's name. It was a small detail, but it stayed with him. Meanwhile, inside the emergency command area, Daniel quietly searched through the night's records. He was not trying to challenge authority. He was trying to understand what happened to someone who had always protected others. As he reviewed the information, he noticed something unusual. Marcus had entered the property during a moment when the team believed everyone had already evacuated. But the rescue log showed that Marcus had been the one who confirmed Emily Sterling's location. He had been the reason the family had a chance to escape. Daniel leaned back, staring at the screen. "You were still helping people," he whispered. He remembered something Marcus had told him during training. A firefighter does not measure the value of a person by their title, their money, or their background. We measure it by the fact that they are human. Those words suddenly felt different. They were not just advice. They were the reason Marcus had gone back. Outside, Nathan stood alone for a moment near the edge of the property. He looked at the uniformed firefighters around him and thought about the person behind the helmet. A man who had entered his home without knowing his name. A man who had protected his family without asking for anything. A man who, according to everyone around him, had spent his entire life putting others first. But Nathan still did not know the full truth. He did not know about the quiet awards, the hidden recognition, or the moment years ago when Marcus had changed his life forever. He only knew one thing. The firefighter everyone seemed ready to forget was the person who had given his family a future. And Nathan Sterling was determined to find out why. For the first time in years, Nathan Sterling felt powerless. Money had solved problems for him his entire life. A phone call could open doors. A signature could change the direction of a company. A team of experts could find answers to almost any question. But standing outside his own home, watching firefighters avoid a simple truth, Nathan realized there were some moments where wealth meant nothing. There was only the truth, and he needed to find it. Inside the temporary command area near Sterling Estate, Daniel Brooks continued reviewing the emergency records. The more he looked, the more uncomfortable he became. The timeline did not make sense. Marcus Carter had entered the property after receiving confirmation that a person was still inside. He had not acted without reason. He had followed the same principle he had taught every firefighter under him: never leave someone behind. Daniel printed the report and walked toward Chief Richard Holloway's office. The chief was sitting quietly, looking through paperwork. "Chief, I need to ask about Captain Carter's final assignment," Daniel said. Richard looked up. "There is nothing to discuss." Daniel placed the report on the desk. "The records show he went in to complete a rescue. The team was not aware of the full situation." Richard leaned back. "You are young, Daniel. You still think every situation has a perfect answer." Daniel looked directly at him. "No, sir. I think every person deserves the same effort." The room became silent. Richard's expression remained calm, but his eyes changed for a moment. It was the smallest reaction, but Daniel noticed it. Outside, Nathan continued asking questions. He spoke with firefighters, emergency workers, and members of the Sterling family. Every answer led back to Marcus. Everyone had a different story about him. A firefighter from another station said Marcus once spent hours helping a family understand how to make their home safer. A neighbor said Marcus had helped elderly residents prepare during wildfire season. A former trainee said Marcus had stayed after work to help him pass his certification exam. Nathan listened carefully. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Marcus Carter was not just a firefighter. He was someone who had built his entire life around protecting others. Later that night, Nathan returned to his home office. The room was quiet, filled with shelves of awards and photographs from his career. Normally, this room represented everything he had achieved. Tonight, it felt different. He opened his computer and searched for Marcus Carter. At first, there were only basic records: fire department history, community service mentions, small articles that most people would overlook. Then Nathan found something that made him stop. A photograph from 12 years earlier appeared on the screen. It showed a younger Marcus standing beside emergency responders after a major incident. The caption mentioned a firefighter who helped rescue Nathan Sterling during a dangerous situation. Nathan moved closer to the screen. His heart raced as he recognized the face. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be." He searched deeper. The information was limited because Marcus had requested privacy after the event, but the details matched. The same calm voice, the same firefighter, the same person who had refused public attention. Nathan sat back in his chair, unable to speak. The man who had protected his family tonight was the same man who had protected his life years ago. For 12 years, Nathan had wondered who that firefighter was. He had wanted to thank him. He had wanted to tell him that his actions mattered. But Marcus had disappeared into a life of service, never asking for recognition. A quiet knock came from the doorway. Claire Sterling stepped inside. "Did you find something?" she asked. Nathan turned the screen toward her. She looked at the picture and immediately understood the change in his expression. "That is him, isn't it?" Nathan nodded slowly. "The person everyone ignored tonight is the person who once gave me another chance." Claire looked down, her voice softer. "Then we need to make sure the world knows who he is." Nathan looked back toward the window, toward the distant lights of emergency vehicles still surrounding the estate. Somewhere beyond those lights was Marcus Carter, the man who had spent his entire life saving others. And for the first time, Nathan realized that the biggest injustice was not only what happened tonight, it was how long someone like Marcus had been forced to remain unseen. The night became quieter as the hours passed, but for Marcus Carter, time felt different. Deep beneath the Sterling estate, surrounded by darkness and silence, he was no longer thinking about recognition, medals, or the people who had forgotten him. He was thinking about the simple reason he had entered that building in the first place. Someone needed help. That was always enough. Marcus rested against the cold surface beneath him, listening carefully to every sound around him. The world outside felt distant. The voices on his radio had faded. The movement of emergency crews above him became only a faint reminder that life was continuing without him. For the first time in many years, Marcus allowed himself to think about something he usually avoided. He thought about how often people saw the uniform before they saw the person wearing it. He thought about the moments when strangers looked at him and made assumptions before hearing his story. But he also thought about the people who had shown him kindness, the residents who remembered his name, the young firefighters who looked up to him, the families who thanked him with tears in their eyes. Those memories reminded him that his work had meaning. A small beam of light moved through the darkness as emergency equipment searched through the area. Marcus slowly lifted his head. He knew someone was looking. He knew someone had not given up. Above ground, Daniel Brooks refused to leave the scene. Other firefighters had returned to their stations, but Daniel stayed near the command area, studying every detail. He knew Marcus too well to accept an incomplete answer. Captain Carter taught us that every second matters, Daniel told another firefighter. We cannot stop looking just because someone says we should. Nathan Sterling heard those words as he walked nearby. He stopped and looked at Daniel. You really believe he is still there? Daniel turned toward him. I believe Marcus Carter is the kind of person who would keep trying until everyone else was safe. Nathan looked toward the estate, his expression changing. For years, he had built his company around finding solutions. Problems were numbers. Challenges were strategies. But this was different. This was about a person who had spent his life helping others while expecting nothing in return. Nathan approached Chief Richard Holloway again. I need a complete report of what happened tonight, he said. Richard looked surprised. Mr. Sterling, the department will handle the review. Nathan remained calm. I am not asking as a businessman. I am asking as the father of a child who was brought out safely because Captain Carter went back. The chief did not respond. For a moment, the confidence he carried seemed less certain. Later, Nathan sat with his family inside a temporary shelter area. His daughter Emily held a blanket around her shoulders and looked toward the firefighters outside. Is he going to be okay? She asked. Nathan looked at her and felt the weight of the question. He did not want to make promises he could not keep. Instead, he answered honestly, I do not know yet, but I know he is someone who does not give up easily. Emily looked down quietly. He told me everything would be okay, she said. Nathan remembered those words. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they showed the kind of person Marcus was. Even in difficult moments, he gave others comfort before thinking about himself. As the early morning light began to appear over Beverly Hills, the first signs of a new day reached the estate. The sky changed from deep blue to soft gray. The emergency lights continued flashing, but the feeling around the property had shifted. People were no longer waiting for a report. They were waiting for Marcus. Daniel stood near the entrance, looking at the horizon. Come on, Captain, he whispered. You always told us nobody gets left behind. And for the first time that night, the people outside understood something important. The man they had almost forgotten was the same man who had spent his entire life making sure no one else was forgotten. The first morning light touched the streets of Beverly Hills, California. But inside Sterling Estate, nobody felt the relief of a new day. The silence carried a different weight. Everyone was waiting for one answer. Everyone wanted to know what happened to Marcus Carter. Daniel Brooks stood near the emergency command area, refusing to leave. His uniform was covered with dust from the long night, but his attention remained focused on the rescue team. He watched every movement, every conversation, every detail that others might ignore. Then, something caught his attention. A firefighter reviewing the equipment records looked confused. Daniel, come look at this, he said. Daniel stepped closer. On the screen were the details from the emergency response. Marcus had not simply entered the building without direction. His actions had been connected to the rescue of Emily Sterling. He had confirmed her location and guided the team toward her. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The official story did not match the reality. Marcus was not someone who disappeared because of a mistake. He was someone who had continued doing his job when everyone else believed the situation was impossible. "This needs to be reported," Daniel said quietly. Before he could walk away, another voice stopped him. "Be careful what you think you know." Daniel turned and saw Chief Richard Holloway standing behind him. The chief looked calm, but his expression was harder than before. "Captain Carter made his own decisions," Richard said. "Sometimes people create their own outcomes." Daniel stared at him. "That is not what happened." The chief said nothing. He simply walked away. But this time, Daniel noticed something different. The confidence was gone. Meanwhile, Nathan Sterling had started making calls of his own. He contacted people who had worked with Marcus over the years. Each conversation revealed another piece of a story that had remained hidden. A former fire department supervisor described Marcus as one of the most dedicated firefighters he had ever known. A community leader explained how Marcus quietly helped families after emergencies without ever asking for recognition. Then Nathan received a call from someone who changed everything. It was from a federal records office. The person on the other end confirmed that Marcus Carter had received the Presidential Medal of Valor years earlier. Nathan looked at the document in disbelief. "Why did I never hear about this?" he asked. The answer was simple. Marcus had requested privacy. He had never wanted his accomplishments to become a reason people treated him differently. Nathan looked at the photograph attached to the record. Marcus stood there in his formal uniform, holding the highest honor he had received. But his expression was the same one Nathan remembered from years ago. Quiet, humble, focused. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. The man everyone saw as just a firefighter had been recognized as one of the bravest people in the country. Yet he still arrived at every call wearing the same simple uniform and treating every person with the same respect. "He never told anyone," Nathan whispered. Claire Sterling, standing beside him, looked at the screen. Maybe because he did not do those things to be remembered. Nathan looked back toward the estate. Then someone needs to remember him anyway. As the investigation continued, more questions began to surface. Security records were reviewed. Communication logs were examined. Small details that seemed unimportant during the emergency started creating a much bigger picture. Daniel found a missing communication entry that explained why the team outside believed Marcus had no chance of returning. The timing did not make sense. The instructions had changed too quickly. The decision to stop searching had happened before the full situation was understood. Daniel looked at the information in front of him and felt a growing sadness. This was not only about one firefighter. It was about how easily people could ignore someone when they believed that person had less power. But Marcus Carter had never measured his value through position or recognition. He measured it through service. And now, the truth that he had spent years hiding was finally rising to the surface. Nathan Sterling stood outside the estate as investigators continued their work. He looked toward the place where Marcus had disappeared and thought about the person behind the uniform. The man who saved strangers. The man who saved his family. The man who once saved him. And for the first time, Nathan understood that the greatest honor Marcus had ever received was not the medal sitting in a government record. It was the trust of every person whose life he had changed. Soon, the world would learn what Nathan already knew. Marcus Carter was never just a firefighter. He was a hero who never needed anyone to call him one. The truth did not arrive like a sudden announcement. It arrived slowly, through small details that could no longer be ignored. By the afternoon after the emergency at Sterling Estate, the investigation had moved from questions to answers. Daniel Brooks sat in a quiet office at Los Angeles Fire Department Station 27, reviewing the records one more time. He knew Marcus Carter better than most people. He knew Marcus would never abandon a mission. He knew Marcus would never make a decision based on pride. And now he knew something else. The official explanation did not tell the whole story. The communication logs showed that Marcus had continued his rescue efforts based on information available at the scene. The team outside had not received the complete picture before the decision was made to stop searching. Daniel stared at the documents, feeling a deep sadness. The problem was not only what happened during one difficult night. The problem was that someone like Marcus, a man who had spent years protecting others, had been treated as if his life mattered less. Across town, Nathan Sterling sat in his office at Sterling Industries, surrounded by glass walls and the view of downtown Los Angeles. For years, this office had represented success. Today, it felt empty. He looked at the information about Marcus again, the Presidential Medal of Valor, the years of service, the countless lives changed, the man who had never asked for recognition. Nathan picked up the phone and called the fire department. "I want to speak with Captain Carter's family," he said. "I need them to know what he means to me." Later that day, Nathan met with Marcus's mother, Denise Carter, at her home in South Los Angeles. The small house was simple, filled with family photographs and memories. Nathan expected to find sadness, but instead he found the same strength he had seen in Marcus. Denise welcomed him inside. "My son never liked attention," she said with a gentle smile. "He always said helping people was enough." Nathan looked around the room and noticed a framed photograph of Marcus as a young firefighter. "He saved my family," Nathan said quietly. Denise looked at him with surprise. "That sounds like Marcus." Nathan lowered his eyes. "He saved my life years ago, too. I spent all this time trying to find the person who helped me, and I never realized he was still out there helping everyone else." Denise smiled softly. Marcus never believed he was special. He believed everyone deserved someone who would show up for them. Those words stayed with Nathan. Meanwhile, the investigation reached a turning point. Officials reviewed the actions of Chief Richard Holloway and discovered serious failures in judgment. The evidence showed that decisions made during the emergency were influenced by unfair assumptions about Marcus's role and importance within the team. The department could no longer ignore what had happened. Richard Holloway was removed from his position while the investigation continued. The news spread quickly through Los Angeles. People who had never heard of Marcus Carter before began learning about the firefighter who had spent 16 years quietly serving his community. They learned about the man who carried the highest national honor but still treated every person like they mattered equally. At the station, firefighters gathered around Marcus's empty locker. Daniel placed a small note beside it. It simply said, "You taught us what courage looks like." When Nathan heard that Marcus had finally been located and was receiving medical attention, he immediately went to see him. Standing outside the room, Nathan paused. He remembered the first time he had met Marcus years ago. A stranger who helped without asking who he was. A hero who never needed anyone to know his name. Nathan walked inside quietly. Marcus opened his eyes and gave a tired but familiar smile. "Mr. Sterling," he said softly. Nathan shook his head. "No, today I am just Nathan." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Nathan said the words he had wanted to say for 12 years. "Thank you. Not because of what you did for me, because of who you are." Marcus looked away for a moment, humbled by the words. "I was just doing what anyone should do." Nathan smiled sadly. "That is exactly why you are different." And in that quiet room, the world finally began to understand what Marcus Carter had known all along. True courage was never about being seen. It was about choosing to do what was right, even when nobody was watching. Weeks after the night that changed everything, Los Angeles felt different. The streets moved the same way they always had. Cars passed through busy intersections. People walked through downtown with coffee in their hands. Businesses opened their doors every morning. But for many people who had heard Marcus Carter's story, something had changed. They looked at ordinary moments differently. They understood that heroes were not always the people standing in front of cameras. Sometimes they were the people quietly doing their jobs while the world looked somewhere else. Marcus returned to Los Angeles Fire Department Station 27 slowly, taking time to recover and reconnect with the team that had missed him. The station felt familiar. The sound of equipment being prepared. The voices of firefighters sharing stories. The small routines that made the place feel like home. Daniel Brooks was the first person to greet him. He stood near Marcus's locker, holding a simple card signed by everyone at the station. "We wanted you to know something," Daniel said. "You were never forgotten." Marcus looked at the card and smiled. I never thought I was. Daniel looked surprised. After everything that happened? Marcus nodded. People make mistakes. What matters is what they do after they realize them. That answer was exactly what everyone expected from Marcus. Even after everything, he did not carry anger. He carried understanding. Nathan Sterling kept his promise. He used his influence not to make himself look good, but to make sure the truth was known. He helped create a program that supported firefighters and emergency workers who dedicated their lives to protecting others. During the announcement in Los Angeles, Nathan stood beside Marcus in front of community leaders, firefighters, and families. Many expected Nathan to speak first. Instead, he stepped aside and let Marcus stand at the center. "This man does not need me to tell people who he is," Nathan said. "His actions have already spoken for him." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the attention. He adjusted his jacket and looked toward the crowd. "I am grateful for the support," he said, "but I want everyone to remember something. Every firefighter, every emergency worker, every person who chooses to help someone else matters. Heroes are not created by awards. They are created by choices." The crowd remained silent for a moment. Then applause filled the room. Not because Marcus wanted recognition, because people finally understood him. Later that evening, Marcus visited his childhood neighborhood in South Los Angeles. He walked past the old garage where his father once repaired cars. He remembered the lessons that shaped him. He remembered that his father never talked about success in terms of money or status. He talked about character. A young boy from the neighborhood approached him. "Are you the firefighter from the news?" the boy asked. Marcus smiled. "I am just Marcus." The boy looked at him with curiosity. "But you are a hero." Marcus looked down for a moment, thinking about all the people who had helped him along the way. A hero is anyone who chooses to care. The sun slowly disappeared behind the buildings, casting a warm, golden light across the street. Marcus stood there quietly, surrounded by people who finally saw what had always been there. Not just a firefighter, not just a medal recipient, not just a man who survived a difficult night. He was a person who had spent his entire life proving that kindness could be stronger than prejudice, and courage could be quieter than fame. Months later, a photograph of Marcus was placed inside Station 27. It was not a picture of him receiving an award. It was not a picture of him standing beside important people. It was a simple photograph of Marcus smiling with his fellow firefighters after another day of service. Beneath the picture was a small message chosen by the team. "The greatest heroes are the ones who never stop showing up." And in the quiet moments when the station lights dimmed and the city outside continued moving, Marcus Carter's story remained a reminder that true strength was never about power, wealth, or recognition. It was about the courage to do what is right, even when nobody is watching.